My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm 32 years old. 6 months ago, I stood in my living room listening to my mother-in-law announce that she and my father-in-law would be moving into our house permanently because, as she put it, family takes care of family, and since you married our daughter, you're responsible for us now. What she didn't know was that I had been recording every conversation, every demand, and every cruel comment they had made since my wife passed away 3 months earlier. The papers they were about to sign weren't moving agreements. They were restraining orders. If you're watching this story unfold, drop a comment about where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button, because what happened next proved that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for toxic people is to show them exactly where the boundaries are. But to understand how I got to that moment, standing in the home I had built with my late wife while her parents tried to take everything from me, I need to take you back 5 years and show you how I fell in love with the most wonderful woman in the world, and how her family spent every day of our marriage trying to convince her she had married beneath her. I met Sarah Chen when we were both 27 years old, working at competing marketing firms in Seattle. We kept running into each other at industry events, and there was this spark between us that neither of us could ignore. She was brilliant, funny, and had this way of seeing through corporate nonsense that made every conversation with her feel refreshing and real. "You're the guy from Fletcher Marketing, right?" she had said at a networking mixer, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "The one who called out that ridiculous campaign strategy in front of everyone last month?" I had laughed, slightly embarrassed. "Guilty. I probably should have been more diplomatic about it." "Are you kidding? It was the most honest thing anyone said all conference. Everyone was thinking it, but you were the only one brave enough to say it out loud." That conversation led to coffee, which led to dinner, which led to 6 months of the most incredible relationship I had ever experienced. Sarah was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. She was ambitious but kind, successful but humble, and she made me want to be a better version of myself every single day. The only problem was her parents. Linda and Robert Chen had immigrated from Taiwan in their 20s and had built a successful import business over 30 years. They had done well for themselves, living in a large house in an upscale neighborhood and maintaining the kind of lifestyle that screamed old money even though they were technically new money. They were proud of what they had accomplished, and they made sure everyone knew it. Sarah was their only child, and they had very specific ideas about who she should marry. In their minds, the perfect son-in-law would be a doctor, lawyer, or business owner from a similarly successful family. Someone who could provide Sarah with the lifestyle she deserved and enhance the Chen family's social standing. I was a marketing manager making $75,000 a year. My parents were public school teachers who lived modestly in a small town in Oregon. I was hardworking, educated, and successful by most measures, but to Linda and Robert, I was simply not good enough for their daughter. Our first meeting was a disaster. Sarah had invited me to your parents' house for dinner, and I had been nervous but optimistic. I brought an expensive bottle of wine, dressed in my best suit, and tried to make a good impression. Linda had looked me up and down with barely concealed disappointment. "So, Marcus, Sarah tells us you work in marketing. What does your father do?" "He's a high school English teacher," I had replied, proud of my dad's 30 years of dedication to education. Linda's smile had frozen. "Oh, how nice. And your mother?" "She teaches elementary school, 3rd grade." The temperature in the room had dropped about 20 degrees. Robert had cleared his throat uncomfortably while Linda had busied herself with serving the meal, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. The rest of the dinner had been an interrogation disguised as polite conversation. They asked about my career prospects, my financial situation, my family's background, and my plans for the future. Every answer I gave seemed to disappoint them more. "Sarah could have her pick of eligible men," Linda had said as we finished dessert, not even bothering to be subtle. "Doctors, lawyers, successful entrepreneurs. Men from good families with real prospects." Sarah had jumped to my defense immediately. "Marcus has excellent prospects, Mom. He's incredibly talented and hardworking. His firm just promoted him to senior manager. That's very nice, dear, Linda had replied in a tone that made it clear she thought it was anything but nice. But there's a difference between a job and a career, between being an employee and being an employer. I had left that dinner knowing that Linda and Robert would never approve of me, no matter what I accomplished. To them, I would always be the poor boy from nowhere who wasn't good enough for their precious daughter. But Sarah didn't care what her parents thought. I love you, she had told me that night as we sat in my car outside her apartment. Not your job title, not your bank account, not your family's social standing, just you. And if my parents can't see how amazing you are, that's their problem, not ours. We got engaged 6 months later, and the wedding planning became a battlefield. Linda wanted to invite 300 people to an elaborate ceremony at the most expensive venue in Seattle. Sarah and I wanted a small, intimate wedding with close friends and family. This is our only daughter's wedding, Linda had argued during one particularly tense planning meeting. We have a reputation to maintain. What will people think if we have some small, cheap ceremony? They'll think we're having the wedding we want, Sarah had replied firmly. Marcus and I are paying for this ourselves, so we're making the decisions. That had been another point of contention. Linda and Robert had offered to pay for the wedding, but only if they had complete control over every decision. Sarah and I had declined, preferring to have a modest wedding we could afford, rather than an elaborate one that came with strings attached. We got married in a beautiful garden ceremony with 80 guests, and it was perfect. But Linda and Robert had made their disapproval known throughout the entire event, sitting stone-faced during the ceremony and making snide comments about the simple decorations and limited menu. Well, I suppose it's charming in its own way, Linda had told several guests within my hearing. Very budget-conscious. Sarah has always been practical like that. The implication was clear. If Sarah had married someone more suitable, she could have had a proper wedding instead of this discount version. The first year of our marriage was happy despite her parents' constant interference. They called Sarah almost daily with comments about our apartment being too small, our cars being too old, and our lifestyle being beneath what she deserved. You're living like college students, Robert had said during one visit, looking around our cozy two-bedroom apartment with obvious distaste. Sarah grew up in a real house. She shouldn't have to live in a cramped rental. We're saving for a down payment, I had explained patiently. We want to buy something we can afford without stretching ourselves too thin financially. If she had married someone more successful, she wouldn't have to wait years to have a proper home, Linda had muttered, not quite under her breath. Sarah had shut that down immediately. Marcus and I are building our life together the way we want to build it. We're happy, and that's what matters. But I could see the toll it was taking on her. Every conversation with her parents left her stressed and upset. She loved them and wanted their approval, but she also loved me and refused to let them undermine our relationship. 2 years into our marriage, I got an incredible opportunity. A startup tech company offered me a position as their director of marketing with a salary of $120,000 plus equity. It was a risk. Startups are always uncertain, but it was also a chance to significantly improve our financial situation and prove to Linda and Robert that I was capable of success. I took the job, and it paid off spectacularly. Within 18 months, the company went public, and my equity stake was suddenly worth nearly $2 million. Combined with our savings and my increased salary, Sarah and I were able to buy a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a great neighborhood and finally achieve the financial stability we had been working toward. I thought, this might finally earn me some respect from Sarah's parents. I was wrong. Well, you certainly got lucky with that stock, Robert had said when we showed them our new house. Right place, right time. Of course, luck isn't the same as real business acumen. Marcus worked incredibly hard to help that company succeed, Sarah had countered. His marketing strategies were crucial to their growth. Linda had waved this away dismissively. I'm sure he did his part. But let's be honest, anyone in that position would have seen the same windfall. It's not like he built the company himself. No matter what I accomplished, it would never be enough. I wasn't a doctor or lawyer or business owner from an established family, so nothing I did would ever meet their standards. But I had Sarah, and that was all that mattered. We were happy, financially secure, and planning our future together. We talked about starting a family, maybe buying a vacation home, traveling to all the places we had always dreamed of visiting. Then, 3 years ago, Sarah started feeling tired all the time. At first, we thought it was just stress from her demanding job. But when the fatigue didn't improve and she started having other symptoms, she went to see a doctor. The diagnosis was stage 3 ovarian cancer, aggressive, advanced, and requiring immediate treatment. Our world fell apart in that moment. Sarah was only 29 years old, healthy and active, with her whole life ahead of her. The doctors gave her a 40% chance of survival with aggressive treatment. We threw everything we had into fighting the cancer. The best doctors, the most advanced treatments, experimental therapies that insurance wouldn't cover. I spent nearly $400,000 over 2 years on medical care, depleting most of our savings and liquidating investments to pay for anything that might help. Linda and Robert were devastated by their daughter's illness, but they also saw it as an opportunity to reassert control over Sarah's life, and, by extension, over me. Sarah should move back home so we can take care of her properly, Linda had announced 2 weeks after the diagnosis. She needs her mother, not an inexperienced husband who doesn't understand what she's going through. I'm not leaving my husband, Sarah had said firmly, despite being weakened by her first round of chemotherapy. Marcus and I are facing this together. But Linda and Robert inserted themselves into every aspect of Sarah's care. They questioned every treatment decision, second-guessed every doctor's recommendation, and constantly suggested that Sarah would be better off if she left me and moved back home. Marcus means well, but he's in over his head, Robert had told Sarah during one hospital visit while I was out of the room. This is too much for someone from his background to handle. You need family who understands what real care looks like. I had overheard that conversation from the hallway, and it had taken everything in me not to confront him right there. But I didn't want to add stress to Sarah's situation, so I swallowed my anger and continued focusing on helping my wife fight for her life. The 2 years of Sarah's illness were the hardest of my life. I took a leave of absence from work to be with her full time. I learned to manage her medications, coordinate with her medical team, and provide the kind of care that required constant attention and dedication. I held her hand through painful treatments, comforted her through moments of despair, and never let her see how terrified I was of losing her. Through it all, Linda and Robert watched me like hawks, looking for any sign that I wasn't capable of caring for their daughter properly. They criticized my decisions, questioned my judgment, and made sure Sarah knew that they thought she would be better off without me. But Sarah never wavered. Even when she was at her weakest, even when the treatments made her so sick she could barely speak, she would squeeze my hand and whisper, "I love you. We're in this together." 18 months after her diagnosis, Sarah went into remission. The cancer was gone, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic about her long-term prognosis. We were ecstatic. We had beaten the odds, and we could finally start rebuilding our life together. We celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, both of us grateful just to be together and looking forward to the future. I want to travel, Sarah had said that night, her eyes bright with plans and possibilities. I want to see everything we talked about before I got sick. Paris, Tokyo, New Zealand. I want to live, Marcus. Really live. Then that's exactly what we'll do, I had promised her. As soon as you're strong enough, we'll start planning our first trip. But 3 months later, during a routine checkup, the doctors found something concerning. More tests revealed that the cancer had returned, this time in her liver and lungs. Stage 4, terminal. The doctors gave her 6 to 12 months. Sarah passed away 7 months later on a Tuesday morning in March, with me holding her hand and telling her how much I loved her. She was 31 years old. The grief was overwhelming. I had lost the love of my life, my partner, my best friend. The house we had bought together felt empty and cold without her. I moved through each day in a fog of pain, barely able to function. Linda and Robert were devastated too, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe we could find some common ground in our shared loss. Maybe Sarah's passing could finally bridge the gap between us. I was so very wrong. The day after Sarah's funeral, Linda and Robert came to my house with what they called important matters to discuss. I assumed they wanted to talk about Sarah's belongings or perhaps make some arrangements for her memorial. Instead, they wanted to talk about money. We need to discuss the financial arrangements, Robert had said, settling into my living room couch like he owned it. Sarah's passing changes a lot of things, and we need to make sure everything is handled properly. I had been confused. What financial arrangements? Sarah and I had already taken care of everything. Our wills are in order, and I've already filed the necessary paperwork. Linda had exchanged a look with Robert before speaking. Marcus, we appreciate everything you did for Sarah during her illness. We really do. But now we need to discuss what happens next. What do you mean? This house, Linda had said, gesturing around the living room. Sarah's share of it belongs to her estate, which means it should pass to her family. I had stared at them in disbelief. Sarah left everything to me. We were married. Everything we owned was joint property. But you bought this house with money that was essentially a windfall, Robert had argued. Luck money from that startup. Sarah deserved to have a real home bought with real earnings, not gambling winnings. It wasn't gambling, I had said, my voice tight with barely controlled anger. I worked hard for that company, and regardless of where the money came from, this house belongs to me. Sarah and I owned it together, and now it's mine. Linda's expression had turned cold. We'll see about that. We've already consulted with an attorney about contesting the will. Sarah wasn't in her right mind during her illness. All those medications, the stress of the treatments. She might have made decisions she wouldn't have made if she were thinking clearly. The implication was clear. They were going to argue that Sarah had been mentally incapacitated when she made her will, and therefore everything should go to them instead of to me. Get out, I had said quietly. Excuse me? Linda had looked shocked, as if she couldn't believe I would dare to challenge them. Get out of my house. Right now. They had left, but not before Linda had delivered one final threat. This isn't over, Marcus. We're not going to let you profit from our daughter's passing. Family takes care of family, and you were never really family. Over the following weeks, Linda and Robert launched a systematic campaign to claim what they considered their rightful inheritance. They filed a lawsuit contesting Sarah's will, claiming she had been mentally incompetent when she made it. They demanded detailed financial records of every penny I had spent during Sarah's illness, implying that I had mismanaged her care or stolen from joint accounts. They also spread rumors throughout their social circle that I had been a terrible husband who had only married Sarah for money and had neglected her during her illness. Friends I had known for years started treating me differently, some even cutting contact entirely after hearing Linda and Robert's version of events. But the worst part was when they started coming to my house unannounced, making demands and treating me like I was obligated to give them whatever they wanted. We're going to need access to Sarah's office, Linda had announced one day, walking into my house without knocking. There are things in there that belong to us. You can't just walk into my house, I had said, blocking her path to the stairs. This was our daughter's house, she had replied coldly. We have every right to be here. Robert had been going through the mail on my kitchen counter. You're still getting statements for Sarah's credit cards. We'll need you to close those accounts and transfer any remaining balances to us. Those were my joint accounts with Sarah, I had explained, trying to remain calm. The balances are my responsibility, and I'm handling them. Everything Sarah owned should come to us, Linda had insisted. Her clothes, her jewelry, her personal items. We're her parents. We deserve to have something to remember her by. I had actually agreed to that. I had carefully packed up Sarah's personal belongings, her favorite clothes, her jewelry, photo albums, and mementos from her childhood, and delivered them to Linda and Robert's house. I thought it might satisfy them and reduce the tension between us, but it only made things worse. They took it as a sign that I was willing to give them what they wanted, which emboldened them to ask for more. Linda started calling me multiple times a day with new demands. We need Sarah's car. It was a gift from us when she graduated college, so technically it belongs to us. The car is paid off and registered in my name now, I had explained patiently. Sarah left it to me. Well, we need it back. We have a right to it. Robert started showing up at my house every few days with lists of items he claimed Sarah had promised to her parents. She told us we could have her grandmother's china set, and those paintings in the dining room, and the Persian rug in the living room. None of this was true. Sarah had never mentioned giving any of these things to her parents, and I knew she would have told me if she had made such promises. But the situation reached a breaking point 6 weeks after Sarah's funeral, when Linda and Robert announced that they would be moving into my house permanently. We've thought about this carefully, Linda had said, sitting in my living room as if she were delivering good news. You're all alone in this big house, and we're getting older. It makes sense for us to move in and take care of things. I had stared at her in disbelief. You want to move into my house? It was Sarah's house too, Robert had said. And since you married our daughter, you have an obligation to take care of us. Family takes care of family. I'm not taking care of you, I had said firmly. This is my home, and you're not moving in. Linda's expression had turned cold and calculating. Marcus, you need to think very carefully about this. We're still planning to contest Sarah's will. If you make things difficult for us, we can make things very difficult for you. But if you cooperate, if you let us move in and help us maintain the lifestyle we deserve, we might be willing to drop the lawsuit. It was extortion, pure and simple. They were threatening to drag me through expensive, emotionally draining legal battles unless I agreed to let them take over my home and my life. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being the nice guy who tried to keep the peace for Sarah's sake. Sarah was gone, and I didn't owe her parents anything except the basic decency of not harming them physically, but I was about to show them exactly what happened when they pushed too far. The moment Linda and Robert left my house that day, I called my attorney, Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer was a sharp, experienced family law attorney who had helped Sarah and me with our estate planning. She had also been increasingly concerned about Linda and Robert's behavior since Sarah's passing. They want to move in with you? Jennifer had said, her voice incredulous when I explained the situation. Marcus, this has crossed the line from grief-driven poor judgment into abusive behavior. We need to shut this down immediately. I want to do more than shut it down, I had told her. I want to make sure they never bother me again. And I want everyone to see exactly what kind of people they are. Jennifer had been quiet for a moment. What do you have in mind? Over the next week, Jennifer and I developed a comprehensive plan. First, we would gather evidence of Linda and Robert's harassment and extortion attempts. Then we would use that evidence to obtain restraining orders that would legally prevent them from coming near me or my property. Finally, we would expose their behavior to everyone who mattered, their social circle, their business contacts, and most importantly, to Sarah's friends who had heard their lies about me. The evidence gathering started immediately. I installed security cameras throughout my house in the living room, kitchen, entryway, and even the front porch. Every camera was hidden in everyday objects like smoke detectors and picture frames, and they recorded both video and audio. I also started recording every phone conversation with Linda and Robert. Washington is a two-party consent state for recordings, but there's an exception when you have reason to believe someone is committing extortion or making threats. Jennifer assured me that their behavior more than qualified. Over the next 3 weeks, I documented everything. Linda calling me 6 times in one day, demanding access to my house. Robert showing up unannounced at 7 a.m. and refusing to leave until I agreed to sign papers, giving him power of attorney over Sarah's estate, an estate that didn't exist because everything had already transferred to me as her spouse. The cameras captured Linda walking through my house, making an inventory of everything she planned to take when they moved in. This furniture is too modern for Marcus anyway, she had said to Robert during one visit. We'll replace it with pieces that have some class, and we'll need to redecorate completely. This whole house looks like it was decorated by someone with no taste. Robert had been recorded going through my financial documents when he thought I had stepped outside. He's got nearly 800,000 in savings, he had told Linda, plus the equity in this house. Sarah's medical care cost him a fortune, but there's still plenty left. If we move in, we can convince him to put us on the accounts for estate planning purposes. Then eventually, this all becomes ours. But the most damaging recording came during a conversation when they thought I was out of earshot. I had left the living room to supposedly take a phone call, but my hidden cameras captured everything they said. I don't know why Sarah married him in the first place, Linda had said bitterly. She could have had anyone. Doctors, lawyers, men from good families. Instead, she chose this nobody from nowhere. At least he had the decency to spend his money keeping her alive, Robert had replied. And now that she's gone, we can finally get what we deserve. We raised her. We gave her everything. That money should be ours. Once we move in, we'll make his life so miserable he'll be begging us to buy him out, Linda had said with a calculating smile. We'll complain about everything, demand changes, make him feel like a guest in his own home. Eventually, he'll realize it's easier just to sign the house over to us and move out. And if he doesn't cooperate? Robert had asked. Then we ruin him socially and professionally, Linda had replied coldly. We tell everyone he abused Sarah, that he was cruel to her during her illness, that he only married her for money. We'll destroy his reputation so thoroughly that he'll never recover. By the time we're done with him, he'll be lucky if he can get a job at all, let alone maintain any social standing. Listening to that recording, I had felt a cold fury unlike anything I had ever experienced. These people had spent 5 years undermining my marriage, criticizing every choice I made, and trying to convince Sarah she had made a mistake in marrying me. Now, mere weeks after losing the woman I loved more than life itself, they were plotting to steal everything I had and destroy me in the process. They had picked the wrong person to manipulate. With 3 weeks of damning evidence compiled, Jennifer and I prepared our counterattack. We filed for restraining orders against both Linda and Robert, citing harassment, extortion attempts, and threats. We submitted the recordings and camera footage as evidence, along with detailed documentation of their pattern of behavior since Sarah's death. We also prepared a comprehensive response to their lawsuit contesting Sarah's will. Jennifer had gathered medical records, testimony from Sarah's doctors, and sworn statements from friends and family, confirming that Sarah had been fully competent and clear-minded when she made her will. The lawsuit was frivolous, and Jennifer was confident it would be dismissed, but the real revenge would come from exposing Linda and Robert's true nature to everyone who knew them. I had spent 5 years listening to them tell people I wasn't good enough for their daughter. Now, everyone would see exactly what kind of people they really were. The hearing for the restraining orders was scheduled for a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Linda and Robert arrived with their own attorney, looking confident that they could convince the judge their behavior was just normal grief and concern for their late daughter's estate. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Jennifer started by presenting the timeline of harassment. Your Honor, the respondents have contacted my client 47 times in the 6 weeks since his wife's passing. They have made repeated demands for access to his home, his financial records, and his personal property. They have threatened to destroy his reputation unless he complies with their demands to move into his house and give them control over his finances. Linda's attorney tried to object. Your Honor, my clients are simply trying to ensure that their late daughter's assets are properly managed. They're concerned that Mr. Webb may not be handling things appropriately. Let's look at what that concern actually looks like, Jennifer had replied, and she began playing the recordings. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as Linda and Robert's voices filled the room. Their demands, their threats, their cruel comments about me and their calculating plans to take everything I had. But the most damaging moment came when Jennifer played the recording of them discussing how they plan to make his life miserable and destroy his reputation. The judge's expression had grown increasingly stern as she listened. When the recordings ended, she looked at Linda and Robert with barely concealed disgust. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, she had said, her voice cold and formal. "I have rarely seen such a clear case of harassment and attempted extortion. Your behavior toward your son-in-law is not only morally reprehensible, but also legally actionable." Linda had tried to speak, but the judge held up her hand. "I am granting the restraining orders as requested. You are prohibited from contacting Mr. Webb in any way, from coming within 500 feet of his home or workplace, and from making any further threats or demands. If you violate these orders, you will be arrested and charged accordingly." The judge had paused, looking at them with something approaching contempt. "I am also noting in my order that your lawsuit contesting your daughter's will appears to be filed in bad faith and as part of a pattern of harassment. I am referring this matter to the probate court with a recommendation that your suit be dismissed and that you be ordered to pay Mr. Webb's legal fees." Linda's face had gone pale. Robert had started to stand, looking like he wanted to argue, but his attorney had pulled him back down. "This hearing is concluded," the judge had said firmly. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I suggest you take this opportunity to reflect on your behavior and consider seeking counseling to deal with your grief in a healthier manner." As we left the courthouse, I could see Linda and Robert standing on the steps, their faces showing a mixture of shock, rage, and humiliation. They had walked into that courtroom confident in their ability to manipulate the situation, and they had walked out with restraining orders and a judge's condemnation of their character. But I wasn't done yet. The legal victory was satisfying, but it wouldn't undo the damage they had done to my reputation among their social circle. It was time to show everyone who Linda and Robert Chen really were. That evening, I sent an email to everyone in Sarah's social circle, her friends, colleagues, extended family members, and people from our shared community. The email included a carefully worded explanation of what had happened since Sarah's passing, along with selected excerpts from the recordings that showed Linda and Robert's true intentions. "I'm sharing this because many of you have heard Linda and Robert's version of events," I had written. "You may have heard that I was a bad husband, that I neglected Sarah during her illness, or that I'm trying to profit from her death. I want you to hear the truth directly from me, and more importantly, to hear Linda and Robert's own words about their intentions. I didn't share everything. I didn't want to seem vindictive or cruel, but I shared enough to show the pattern of manipulation, the extortion attempts, and their plans to take everything from me while destroying my reputation." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Friends I thought I had lost reached out to apologize for believing Linda and Robert's lies. Sarah's colleagues expressed shock and disgust at her parents' behavior. Even some of Linda and Robert's own relatives contacted me to say they were appalled by what they had heard. "I always knew Linda could be controlling," Sarah's Aunt Margaret had written, "but I had no idea she was capable of this level of cruelty. Sarah loved you so much, and you were devoted to her until the end. I'm so sorry you've had to deal with this on top of your grief." But the most significant response came from Linda and Robert's business and social circles. The country club where they had been members for 20 years asked them to resign after several members complained about their behavior. Business contacts started distancing themselves, concerned about being associated with people who had tried to extort and manipulate their recently widowed son-in-law. Within 2 weeks, Linda and Robert had gone from respected members of Seattle's Chinese-American business community to social pariahs. Invitations stopped coming. Business opportunities dried up. Friends stopped calling. They had spent 5 years trying to convince everyone that I wasn't good enough for their daughter. Now everyone knew that they had never been good enough to be Sarah's parents. The probate court hearing came 3 weeks later, and it was even more decisive than the restraining order hearing. The judge took one look at the evidence of Linda and Robert's harassment and bad faith, listened to Sarah's doctors confirm that she had been fully competent when making her will, and dismissed their lawsuit with prejudice. "Not only are you barred from filing any similar suits in the future," the judge had told them, "but you are ordered to pay Mr. Webb's legal fees in the amount of $47,000 for the frivolous nature of this lawsuit and the emotional distress you have caused him." Linda had actually gasped at the amount. Robert had looked like he had been punched in the stomach. This case is dismissed, the judge had concluded, and I sincerely hope you both take time to consider the damage your actions have caused and the disrespect you have shown to your daughter's memory and her choice of spouse. As we left the courthouse for the second time, Jennifer had turned to me with a satisfied smile. That's the end of it. They can't touch you anymore. She was right. The restraining orders meant they couldn't contact me or come near my property. The dismissed lawsuit meant they had no legal claim to anything Sarah had left me, and the court order for them to pay my legal fees meant they had actually lost money in their attempt to steal from me. But more than the legal victory, what mattered was that everyone now knew the truth about Linda and Robert Chen. Their reputation was destroyed, their social standing was gone, and their plans to profit from their daughter's death had spectacularly backfired. The months following the court victories were a time of healing and rebuilding. I grieved for Sarah properly without the constant stress of her parents' harassment. I started therapy to process both my loss and the trauma of dealing with Linda and Robert's abuse. And slowly I began to imagine a future where I could be happy again. I also discovered something I hadn't expected: a community of people who had experienced similar situations with toxic in-laws or family members. After my story spread, I received dozens of messages from people sharing their own experiences of being manipulated, extorted, or abused by relatives who felt entitled to their money or property. "Your story gave me the courage to stand up to my own family," one woman had written. "They've been demanding money from me for years, and I always felt too guilty to say no. But seeing how you set boundaries with Sarah's parents showed me that it's okay to protect yourself." That's when I decided to do something meaningful with my experience. Using a portion of the money Sarah and I had saved together, money I had intended to spend on the travels we had planned, I established the Sarah Chen Memorial Foundation. The foundation provided legal assistance to people dealing with estate disputes, family harassment, or financial exploitation by relatives. Sarah believed in standing up for what was right, I had said at the foundation's launch event. She spent her life fighting for justice and fairness, even when it was difficult. This foundation honors her memory by helping other people fight for their own rights and dignity. The foundation's first client was a widow whose adult children were trying to claim her late husband's pension and life insurance, arguing that their father wouldn't have wanted their mother to have so much money when she's just going to waste it. We helped her fight the case and win, setting a precedent that would help other widows protect their rightful inheritances. The work was meaningful and helped me feel connected to Sarah's values and principles. Every person we helped felt like a way of honoring her memory and the life we had planned to build together. As for Linda and Robert, I heard through mutual acquaintances that they were struggling. Their reputation had taken such a severe hit that Robert's import business had lost several major contracts. The $47,000 in legal fees they owed me had been a significant financial burden, and the social isolation they experienced was particularly hard on Linda, who had built her entire identity around her social standing and connections. Part of me felt satisfaction at their downfall. They had tried to destroy me when I was at my most vulnerable, and instead they had destroyed themselves. But mostly, I just felt sad. Sad that Sarah's parents had been so consumed by greed and entitlement that they had wasted the opportunity to grieve their daughter properly. Sad that their relationship with me, the person who had loved Sarah most in the world, had devolved into legal battles and restraining orders instead of shared memories and mutual support. Sarah would have been heartbroken to see what her parents had become. She had always hoped that eventually they would accept me and that we could all be a family. Instead, their worst qualities had emerged in the wake of her death, and they had revealed themselves to be exactly the kind of people she had always defended them against. A year after Sarah's passing, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Linda, handwritten on expensive stationery, and it had been forwarded by my attorney since the restraining order prohibited direct contact. "Dear Marcus," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you, and I am sending this through your attorney so as not to violate the court orders. I want you to know that I have been in therapy for the past 6 months, working through my grief and my behavior following Sarah's death. My therapist has helped me understand that I was displacing my pain and anger onto you because I couldn't accept that Sarah was gone. That doesn't excuse what I did, but I hope it helps explain it. I am deeply sorry for the pain I caused you during the worst time of your life. You loved Sarah with your whole heart, and you were exactly the husband she deserved. I was too proud and too stubborn to see that until it was too late. I don't expect your forgiveness, and I'm not asking to resume contact. I just wanted you to know that I recognize how wrong I was, and I am trying to become a better person. Robert is also in therapy, though he finds it more difficult to admit his mistakes. We have lost so much: our daughter, our reputation, our peace of mind. But the worst loss is knowing that we will never have a relationship with you, the person who knew and loved Sarah best. I hope you are finding happiness and peace. You deserve both. Sincerely, Linda Chen. I read the letter 3 times, trying to decide how I felt about it. The apology seemed genuine, and I believe that Linda probably was in therapy and trying to change. But the damage was done. The things she and Robert had said and done couldn't be erased by an apology, no matter how sincere. I didn't respond to the letter. Not because I was still angry, though I was, but because I had moved forward with my life, and looking backward would only cause more pain. Linda and Robert had made their choices, and they would have to live with the consequences. 18 months after Sarah's death, I met someone. Her name was Rebecca Torres, and she was an attorney who volunteered with the Sarah Chen Memorial Foundation. She was smart, compassionate, and understood grief in a way that only someone who had experienced profound loss could understand. Her own husband had passed away from a heart attack 3 years earlier, leaving her with 2 young children and a shattered heart that she had slowly learned to heal. "I'm not looking to replace what I lost," she had told me during one of our early conversations. "I'm looking to build something new, something that honors the past but doesn't live in it." That resonated with me deeply. I would never stop loving Sarah or missing her, but I also couldn't spend the rest of my life frozen in grief and anger. I needed to move forward, to live the kind of full, meaningful life that Sarah would have wanted for me. Rebecca and I dated slowly and carefully, both of us conscious of the complexity of building a relationship while carrying the weight of past loves and losses. Her children, Emma and Lucas, were wonderful kids who had also learned to navigate grief at far too young an age. "Do you think your wife would have liked my mom?" Emma, who was 8 years old, had asked me one day with the directness only children can manage. I had thought about it carefully before answering. "I think Sarah would have admired your mom for being so strong and raising you and your brother to be such good people. And I think she would want me to be happy, the same way your dad would want your mom to be happy." Emma had nodded thoughtfully. "That's what Mom says too. That loving someone new doesn't mean we didn't love our people who died. It just means we have more love to give." 2 years after Sarah's passing, Rebecca and I got married in a small ceremony attended by close friends and family. It was different from my wedding to Sarah, quieter, more subdued, marked by the knowledge that happiness and loss could coexist. But it was also beautiful in its own way, a testament to the human capacity for healing and hope. I kept my house, the one Sarah and I had bought together, but Rebecca and the kids moved in, and slowly it became a home for our new family while still honoring the memory of the love that had first made it a home. Sarah's photos remained on display, and we talked about her openly with the kids, making sure they understood that she had been an important part of my life, and that remembering her wasn't a betrayal of our new family. The Sarah Chen Memorial Foundation continued to grow, helping dozens of people each year navigate difficult family situations and estate disputes. Rebecca brought her legal expertise to the foundation's board, and together we expanded its services to include grief counseling and support groups for people dealing with loss while also facing family conflict. Sarah's story matters because it shows that even in grief, we have to protect ourselves from people who would exploit our pain, Rebecca had said during one foundation event. And Marcus's story matters because it shows that standing up for yourself doesn't make you cruel or unforgiving. It makes you strong. 3 years after Sarah's death, I received word through mutual acquaintances that Robert had passed away from a stroke. He was 64 years old. Linda was now alone, having alienated most of her friends and family through her behavior following Sarah's death. I felt a complicated mix of emotions when I heard the news. Sadness for Linda, who had now lost both her daughter and her husband, relief that the person who had made my life so difficult was gone, and a strange sense of closure as if this final loss had completed a painful chapter of my life. I sent a brief condolence card to Linda through my attorney, nothing personal, just a simple acknowledgement of her loss. I didn't attend the funeral, but I made a donation to a charity in Robert's name. It felt like the right thing to do, even after everything that had happened. Linda sent a thank you note in return, also through my attorney. "Your kindness in this moment means more than you know," she had written. "I have lost everything that mattered to me, and I know it's because of my own actions. Thank you for being a better person than I ever was." I didn't respond, but I hoped she had found some peace. Anger and revenge had served their purpose. They had protected me and stopped Linda and Robert from destroying my life. But holding on to those feelings forever would only poison my own future. I chose to let go and focus on the life I was building with Rebecca and the kids. 5 years after Sarah's death, I stood in my backyard watching Emma and Lucas play on the swing set we had installed the previous summer. Rebecca was beside me, her hand in mine, and I felt something I hadn't thought I would ever feel again. Contentment. The pain of losing Sarah would never fully go away. There were still moments when I would see something that reminded me of her and feel that sharp stab of grief. But those moments were becoming less frequent, and they no longer defined my existence. "You did right by her," Rebecca had told me once during a conversation about Sarah. "You loved her, completely. You fought for her health with everything you had, and when she was gone, you protected her legacy and honored her memory. That's all anyone can do." She was right. I had done everything I could for Sarah while she was alive, and I had protected myself from her parents' attempts to exploit her death. I had used my pain and anger productively, establishing a foundation that helped others and setting boundaries that protected my well-being. But most importantly, I had learned that protecting yourself from toxic people, even family, wasn't cruel or selfish. It was necessary. Sarah's parents had tried to destroy me at my most vulnerable, and I had every right to defend myself and ensure they faced consequences for their actions. The restraining orders remained in effect, though Linda had never violated them. Her business had downsized significantly, and she had moved to a smaller house in a different neighborhood. According to mutual acquaintances, she had become quieter and more withdrawn, spending most of her time alone and rarely venturing out into social situations. Part of me wondered if I should reach out to her, offer some gesture of reconciliation now that so much time had passed. But every time I considered it, I remembered the recordings of her planning to destroy my life. The way she had tried to steal everything from me when I was drowning in grief. The cruel things she had said about me to anyone who would listen. Forgiveness didn't require reconciliation. I could release my anger and move forward with my life without inviting toxic people back into it. That was a lesson that had taken me years to learn, but it was one I would never forget. The Sarah Chen Memorial Foundation celebrated its 5th anniversary with a gala that raised over $300,000 for legal assistance and grief counseling services. Over 100 people had been helped by the foundation's programs, and the success stories were remarkable. One woman had successfully fought off her stepchildren's attempts to claim her late husband's estate. A widower had protected his home from his deceased wife's siblings, who claimed they were entitled to half the property. A grieving mother had stopped her ex-husband's family from gaining custody of her children by claiming she was too unstable to care for them. Each of these cases represents someone who was vulnerable, grieving, and being exploited by people who should have been supporting them, I had said in my speech at the gala. The foundation exists because my late wife Sarah believed that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, especially during the hardest moments of their lives. Her parents forgot that principle, and in doing so, they taught me an important lesson. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept abuse, even from family. The speech received a standing ovation, and afterwards, several people approached me to share their own stories of family betrayal and boundary setting. Each conversation reinforced what I had learned through my own experience. Protecting yourself from toxic people wasn't selfish or vindictive. It was an act of self-preservation and self-respect. Rebecca and I continued to build our life together, blending our families and creating new traditions while honoring the memories of the spouses we had lost. Emma and Lucas called me Marcus rather than Dad, which felt appropriate and respectful of their late father's memory. But they also knew they could count on me for love, support, and guidance. And that was what mattered. The house that Sarah and I had bought together became a home filled with laughter, homework struggles, family dinners, and the beautiful chaos of raising children. Sarah's presence was still there in the photos on the walls, in the garden she had helped me plan before she got sick, in the quiet moments when I would remember something funny she had said or done. But the house was also Rebecca's home now, and Emma's and Lucas's. It had evolved from a monument to what I had lost into a testament to what I had found. The resilience to survive loss, the courage to protect myself from those who would exploit my pain, and the hope to build something new and beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. 7 years after Sarah's death, I received a final letter from Linda. It came through my attorney, as all her correspondence had since the restraining orders were issued. "Dear Marcus," it began, "I am writing to let you know that I have been diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. The doctors say I have perhaps 6 months to live. I am not writing to ask for sympathy or to seek reconciliation. I am writing because I want you to know that I have left instructions in my will that everything I own, the house, the business assets, everything should be donated to the Sarah Chen Memorial Foundation upon my death. It's not much, perhaps $200,000 in total, after debts are settled. But it's what I have, and I want it to go toward helping people in the way I failed to help you. I also want you to know that my therapist helped me understand something important. I was never angry at you. I was angry at the universe for taking my daughter. I was angry at myself for all the ways I had failed Sarah during her life. And I was angry at the reality that she had chosen you over me, that her last years were spent loving you rather than needing me. None of that excuses my behavior, but it explains it. You were right to protect yourself from me. You were right to set boundaries and enforce consequences. I hope that in some small way, my final gift to the foundation can begin to make amends for the pain I caused. I hope you are happy, Marcus. You deserve to be. And I hope that somewhere Sarah knows that you honored her memory by refusing to let anyone, including her own mother, dishonor the love you shared. With sincere remorse and regret, Linda Chen." I read the letter multiple times, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness that Linda had never been able to reconcile with me before her death. Gratitude that she was finally taking responsibility for her actions. And a profound sense of closure knowing that this painful chapter of my life was finally, definitively ending. Linda passed away 4 months later. I didn't attend her funeral. It didn't feel appropriate, given everything that had happened, but I made sure the foundation sent flowers and a donation in her memory. It was the right thing to do, and it was what Sarah would have wanted. True to her word, Linda's will left everything to the Sarah Chen Memorial Foundation. After settling her debts and final expenses, the donation totaled $193,000. It was a substantial gift that would allow the foundation to expand its services and help even more people. "It's fitting, in a way," Rebecca had said when we learned about the donation. She spent Sarah's life trying to control everything, and she spent the years after Sarah's death trying to take everything from you. But in the end, her legacy is helping people protect themselves from the kind of behavior she exhibited. There's a kind of poetic justice in that. She was right. Linda's final act had been one of genuine repentance and restitution. It didn't erase the pain she had caused or undo the damage she had done. But it showed that even people who behave terribly can sometimes find redemption, even if that redemption comes too late for reconciliation. Today, 10 years after Sarah's death, I live a life that is both familiar and completely different from what I had imagined. I'm still in the house Sarah and I bought together, but it's filled with the sounds of Rebecca's laughter and the kids' music and the normal chaos of a blended family. The Sarah Chen Memorial Foundation has helped over 500 people navigate family conflicts and estate disputes, becoming a nationally recognized resource for people dealing with grief and exploitation. Emma is now 15 and talking about becoming a lawyer like her mom. Lucas is 12 and obsessed with computers and coding, which reminds me so much of my own interests at that age. Rebecca and I have built a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that comes from both having survived profound loss. I still think about Sarah every day. I still miss her. But the grief is no longer sharp and overwhelming. It's become a part of who I am, woven into my identity alongside all the other experiences that have shaped me. And when I think about Linda and Robert, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel sadness for what could have been, for the family relationships that might have existed if they had been different people. But I also feel satisfaction in knowing that I protected myself when I needed to, that I set boundaries that preserved my dignity and well being, and that I used my experience to help others facing similar situations. The lesson I learned from that painful time is one I share with everyone who comes to the foundation seeking help. You don't owe anyone access to your life, your resources, or your peace of mind, no matter how they're related to you. Family is supposed to be about love, support, and mutual respect. When family members violate those principles, you have every right to protect yourself, even if that means cutting them out of your life completely. Sarah's parents thought they could manipulate me because I was grieving and vulnerable. They thought they could take advantage of my love for their daughter to extract money, property, and control. They were wrong. And their miscalculation didn't just protect me, it created a foundation that has protected hundreds of others from similar exploitation. That's the real revenge, I suppose. Not the restraining orders or the dismissed lawsuits or the social consequences, though all of those were satisfying. The real revenge is that Linda and Robert's worst behavior inspired something good, something that helps people and honors Sarah's memory in a way they never could have. If you're watching this and you recognize patterns from your own life, family members who exploit your grief, relatives who feel entitled to your resources, people who manipulate you when you're vulnerable, I want you to know that you have the right to protect yourself. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. Enforcing consequences isn't vindictive. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love and support us are the ones who hurt us most deeply. And when that happens, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the memory of those you've lost is to refuse to accept that abuse. Sarah believed in justice, fairness, and standing up for what was right. By protecting myself from her parents' exploitation, I honored her values and her memory. And by building the foundation, I turned my pain into something that helps others find the strength to protect themselves too. That's not just revenge, that's transformation. And it's a legacy that both Sarah and I can be proud of. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect yourself from toxic family members, even when you're grieving. Drop a comment about your own experiences with setting boundaries or standing up to family exploitation. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the face of manipulation and abuse. Remember, you don't owe anyone access to your life just because they're family. Your peace, your dignity, and your well-being matter, and you have every right to protect them.